Hey guys, welcome back to the video. In this video, guys, my spoiler-free review for A Man Called Otto. This film follows Otto Anderson, a grumpy widower, and his journey towards the end of his life. Through new people in his life and reminiscing on the past, he has a lot running through his mind. Now, the release for this movie has been really weird. I'm pretty sure it's in limited theaters this upcoming weekend, and then next weekend, starting on January 13th, is the big wide release. And before we get into all of my thoughts on A Man Called Otto, if you've seen or want to check out this movie, let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Both those seem more time, let's get into it. The first thing I want to say about this movie is that it is much darker than you would have expected if you've seen any of the trailers. I watched the trailers for this movie like a million times because it's been playing in theaters since like November, and I've been to the movie so much in the last 2 months. Every single time I go to a movie, I see this trailer, and I'm going to be honest, this is probably one of the most mismarketed movies I've seen in a very long time. It is so dark. I am going to keep this whole video spoiler free except for this one little part. I do want to go into one little detail about how dark it does get, just as a little bit of a warning before you go into the movie. So if you want to go into this movie like completely blind, then you can skip to the timestamp on the screen right now. And also a trigger warning, because this movie does talk about suicide, and it actually goes through Otto trying to commit suicide a different number of times, and that through all of those experiences he kind of learns about his life. And that's kind of all of the like major spoilers I want to give away. I just kind of want to give that heads up because it is a pretty dark topic that I feel like they kind of should have addressed in theaters, but at the same time, this movie was marketed as more of a family-friendly movie about just this grumpy old man who becomes friends with the cat and the neighbors and just stuff like that, right? And that's kind of what it is to a certain extent, but it definitely goes a lot deeper than that. And honestly, that's why I like this movie like as much as I actually did. I mean, I don't think it's like phenomenal cinema. I don't think it's like the best movie ever. Nevertheless, I was just really taken by surprise in terms of where this movie went and the lengths that it actually went to in terms of exploring grief and dealing with people around you dying and those that you love dying, and kind of what that drives people towards. And so I thought that was a very interesting thing for this movie to explore, and I'm glad they did explore it because I think it's something really interesting that we don't really get to see in movies. But again, I think they should have marketed it in that sense. And so to an extent, I think it was mismarketed in a pretty good way. Like financially, I think it was still mismarketed in a good enough way for the movie to succeed. But once you get into the movie, if you take your children to watch this movie or anything like that, I mean, I would take my kid to watch it. I'm 18, by the way, so I have no actual parenting advice, or don't take actual parenting advice from me, but it does deal with heavy topics. That's all I'm trying to say. There is a lot of like happy stuff about this movie, and the main chunk of that actually comes from the side characters. They do an amazing job of bringing in these side characters throughout this movie and giving us just an emotional enough connection to not only Otto, but these side characters, to where as this story progresses and you get closer and closer and there's more and more interactions and reasons for these characters to be together, you actually feel a great emotional connection. And though I do think there are some fairly big issues in terms of pacing with this movie and towards the very end of it specifically, I think one thing that it did really well was it tied a nice bow around the entirety of the story that we were witnessing, and that's 100% due to the emotional attachments that we had with character relationships. I do feel like though this story is important in terms of like taking care of those that are older than us, like elderly people in our society, and like we don't really understand what they're going through until we experience it, because there's really no way to understand that emotional like trauma that someone goes through when you live your whole life and then everyone in your life is gone, everyone that you know is gone, and you're the only one left and you're just like waiting it out until it's your turn to die. So it's like very dark themes, but I just feel like none of the performances really went to the same level in terms of how dark the story was and how dark and actually emotional the performances could have been. There's one actress in this movie, she's like the main side character. The actress name is Mariana Trevino. I think that's how you pronounce it. Excuse my pronunciation if it was wrong, but she is really great in terms of just emotional moments. She has this one really great emotional moment towards the end of this movie, and just in general, she's an amazing side character. And like I said earlier, I think side characters definitely carry the entirety of this movie on its back in terms of just emotional connections and weight and just making us actually care about what happens to Tom Hanks' character, because it will affect our other side characters a lot. And the final thing I want to say is that this movie isn't particularly written that well, but I think paired with like emotional moments and these other character relationships that honestly weren't that difficult to build up. It was like in a few moments you could really feel the chemistry between the actors and actresses, and so that's kind of what interlinked us within those emotional connections between characters. I think that carries the actual movie rather than like the story and stuff like that, because additionally the pacing really isn't that great. I think the ending drags on a lot. I mean, it's 100% necessary to the story, but the way that they play it out is not that great at all. At the end of the day, I really like this movie because it perfectly portrayed all of like real fears that I have about aging and losing time and getting old and stuff like that. And so I think it perfectly portrays all of those things. At the same time, it's not what it was marketed as at all whatsoever. So go in with a little bit of caution. If you really like the first few trailers, just know it's what the trailers are, but just a lot darker. But I personally had a good time with that darker tone. So I'm going to give A Man Called Otto a solid 7 out of 10. But guys, that's it for all of my thoughts on this movie. Again, if you've seen or want to check out A Man Called Otto, let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.